What could have made this Medevac Learjet crash in the city of Philadelphia on January 31st, 2025? We're going to answer that question today. Yeah, there it is. It looks like it's in one piece, so I don't think it fell apart. So here is a actual photo of the plane that crashed, a Lear 55 jet. And so here's what it would have looked like inside the ambulance. I'm told that this is an actual picture of inside of it. But anyway, you would have the 11-year-old patient would be laying here on the stretcher, and then the pilot and the co-pilot would be sitting back up here. And then right here, the mother of the child would most likely be sitting right here in this seat because it's closest to where the child's face is. And then likely you would have the doctor or paramedic sitting here, and or the doctor or other paramedic sitting right here. So remember, there was two other people, a doctor and a paramedic. The mother, the daughter, the pilot, and the co-pilot would be here. Okay, so when you look at the airfield, here is the airfield. It's the Northeast Philadelphia Airport. And so they took off from right here from runway 240. Well, it's actually 24. And they were supposed to come down here, and they were given instructions to turn right to 290, which would be about a 50-degree turn, probably something kind of like this. They should have been heading out over this way. And I'll show you the exact, chart of the flight in a minute, but they ended up going straight here. So basically, here's the end of your runway right here. And it looks like it's maybe 2 miles at the most here where it crashed, because you can see where it's got all of the blocked out areas here for the roads. And I'll show you precisely where it hit. All right, so as we zoom in here, this right here is the Dunkin' Donuts at the Roosevelt Mall there. And it crashed right here on this sidewalk. So it actually, let me see how that lines up with the end of the runway. Let's see, the runway is over here. So yeah, it kind of looks like it was coming in and curved down this way slightly towards this way. All right, and then I believe it took out the top part of this sign, and I don't think this is the current sign. I think this is an old satellite map from 2022, and I don't think this sign is there. There's a different one there now. That is my hypothesis, but this would be where it crash landed. Now, to give you an idea of just how big the force of this blast was, of course, it shattered windows of everybody here, but let me show you something. Now, this is something the news media didn't show you about that diner video. Remember they showed you that video of the diner where the old guy that you see right here, he's going to get hit by a piece of shrapnel in the head, and he's okay. And the lady sitting at the booth in front of him, at the next booth over, she got hit by something because you could see it fall off of her hair or her body there, a little piece of something. It might have been glass. But remember, this is the impact point right here. And that piece traveled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks all the way over here to the Four Seasons Diner. And that's where the guy was sitting. And it traveled. When you think about it, it's amazing that all the cars and people that could have been in the way, that little piece came flying all the way down here, through that parking lot, through the glass window, and inside that diner. And hits the guy in the head, and he doesn't die from it. That is a miracle, folks. Okay, so when I look at the flight radar data here, you can see there's your original speed. It got to a little bit over 200 knots. And so the yellow is the speed, and the blue is the altitude. So you can see it got as high as 1,650 feet. And remember, the radar doesn't catch it right from the beginning of the flight. It catches it when it starts somewhere around 1,500 feet or so. See, and then it works its way over to the right there, and it gets higher and higher, and it maxes out at 1,650 feet. And then let me take you over to this data point where it starts to fall. Look at the timestamp. It is exactly 6:06 and 59 seconds. And then 2 seconds later at 6:07 and 1 second. So as we continue looking at the chart, here's why I don't think that it could have stalled. Because when you look here, see the ground speed is actually increasing as time goes by. As you look from left to right, see the altitude kind of levels off around 1,650 feet. But the speed is still increasing. So that means then that the engines are not flared out. The engines would have had to have flared out many seconds before for it to have an effect and for you to start losing your lift there. but we're doing fine. And look, it's accelerating. But right at this point, see, remember at that 606.59, and then 2 seconds later, look at the difference in altitude. You have 400 feet difference. I think that is way too much difference in 2 seconds time for that to be just loss of lift. Okay, now watch this ring camera video I'm going to show you. You're going to hear the plane and see it come out of the upper right-hand corner of the screen.
She's still hanging.
Now, that's all I can show you. I can't show you the actual explosion because YouTube will demonetize the video and put the kibosh on it and everything. But one thing, though, you heard the sound of that jet engine. Now, I don't know if it was both engines or one engine, but we heard an engine. At least one. And the jet can fly easily on that one engine and still maintain lift. So we know, that's my proof in my mind, that this jet did not lose lift. So you're probably looking at me going, hey, Jeff, these guys are pilots. They know more than you. Why would they be saying that the jet was in an aerodynamic stall? I don't know. Maybe they didn't see the video or pay attention that there was audio, that the jet engine was running. Maybe if you banked too steeply or something, they might have gone into a stall. Now, I'll slow it down to you here, 4x, so you can see there it is coming out of the sky. And that's a pretty good steep angle that it's dropping. And if you look, it looks like it's also at the last few seconds here tumbling and spinning a bit, maybe. I don't know. So, for example, here's an infrared video from a police chopper during a police chase where the guy's wheels came off and he's leaving sparks behind him. That is what you would see. You would see all sorts of debris and stuff falling off of the back of that plane when it was coming down.
He's all over the road now, guys. Signal 4, signal 4.
But what did you really see? You know, when you see that plane coming out of the clouds, there's no sparks behind it, no flames behind it. There's nothing apparently falling off of the plane that I can see. So it doesn't even look like it broke up in flight. So it really looks like what you're seeing here is just the normal lights that are on the plane, and they'll bloom up because of the nighttime vision. Now, a lot of people were going all over the internet, leaving comments on numerous videos saying, hey, this thing was an air ambulance, was it not? Doesn't it have oxygen tanks? So their theory was that, oh, the oxygen tanks blew up, and that's what caused it. But you know what? Those oxygen tanks are a lot tougher than you think. And I don't think that an oxygen tank is just going to blow up on an air ambulance like that. I mean, it sounds kind of like it makes sense, but it really doesn't. Those things are super tough. In fact, if you look at the picture here of the one that they found on the street in front of the McDonald's, right up the street there from the crash site, you can see the tank looked like it was in pretty good shape there. Now, whether it still had the neck on it or not is unknown. So it certainly seems like that oxygen tank survived the entire crash and the subsequent explosion, because there it is, intact on the street in one piece. Now, there may have been more than one tank recovered. I don't know. Here's a picture of another one found on the street. This could be a different one. Okay, so I made this formula here for us to determine how long will it take for the plane to drop from the sky and hit the ground from that point. And so your time is the square root of 2h over g, which, as you know, h is the initial height. I just made it 1,600 feet. And g is the acceleration due to gravity, 9.81 meters per second squared. We've all known that since middle school. And now if we put the numbers in and calculate it, it comes out to about 9.97, or approximately 10 seconds to hit the ground from 1,600 feet. And that's assuming, of course, no air resistance whatsoever. Looking at the ring video, it appears that the jet took about 3 seconds to come down from about 450 feet, which is where they say the bottom of the clouds were, until it hit the ground. And there's the NTSB looking at it yesterday at that point of impact. So what I think caused this plane crash, based on that speed and altitude data that I showed you at the very end, those last 2 seconds before it cut off there, and it seemed to be dropping very rapidly like this. I think somebody at the controls was going like this. Now, we don't know why that would have happened, but I suspect spatial disorientation. Spatial disorientation is very common. In fact, one of the more famous cases of this was John F. Kennedy Jr., who died in his own plane with his wife and his sister-in-law sitting in the back there, flying back to Martha's Vineyard. And they think that he got caught up in like these clouds and you couldn't, or maybe it was too dark I forget what the weather condition was, but the basic scenario behind disorientation is you can't see the horizon. And so many experts think that he entered what they call the graveyard spiral or the graveyard spin. And this is what I think likely happened here. Maybe not quite a spin, but it looks like they certainly ended up pointing the plane straight downward. Right? There's no lights. There's no city lights on there. You know, it's not daytime, so you can't see, for example, where water would meet the sky or something like that. You just don't know where your horizon is. And so when these guys took off and they're right up in the clouds immediately, they probably got momentarily disoriented and were not watching the instruments. And when you have those instruments, remember that one big round one there, that's your attitude meter, is your horizon, and you have to be watching that one to make sure your plane is level and flying straight, flat, level, all of that. You got to be watching your altitude, making sure the meter isn't showing you losing altitude. That would have been a problem. But they lost it so fast that I think it was because they probably did this and not knowing that they weren't level. They were not on that horizon. And I think they just flew that plane at full speed right into the ground. Because as you remember, I just showed you seconds ago how when the plane pops out of the bottom of those clouds at 450 feet up, it took 3 seconds to hit the ground. That's not enough time to react at all. It's not even enough time to say, oh no. So I'm hoping that they didn't really have so much time to like suffer or anything or really live in fear to see that it was coming. But I'm sure they knew within a couple of seconds. Because remember too, what is the stall speed on that Learjet 55? It's probably somewhere in the 180 or below. I don't know, but it's got to be way lower than the speed that they were traveling at. So I don't think that they stalled. So the NTSB just released this video here today on February 3rd, 3 days after the crash. And there's the bottom of the crater, and that is where they found the cockpit voice recorder. So they're hoping that it gives them some kind of data. Maybe we can hear what they were talking about on the plane, because there's not much at all on the air traffic control frequencies from them. And nothing certainly that would have indicated that they had a problem. And so here they are getting ready to fly their drone up, and they're in the parking lot in front of the Macy's right behind the Assad's Chicken. So this is previously unreleased drone footage that the NTSB shot yesterday on Sunday, on February 2nd. And so there you can see the red tape surrounds the critical area because that is the point of impact. There is the crater from when the jet nosedived into it. Now, if you notice the sign for the mall right next to it to the left there, look at the very top of it. It almost looks like, to me, the plane may have just barely clipped that sign. It was as it was coming down, and it crashed headfirst and created that crater there. And now there's a circling around that you can get a better view of the sign. And so they're standing in that crater. They say it's 8 feet deep, and at the bottom of it is where they found the cockpit voice recorder. And they've already started to sweep up a lot of the street, because I can see that a lot of the pieces that were there before are simply gone. And it looks like the explosion and everything sort of went in the direction of the way it's traveling right now, right up the street. And I believe that vehicle right there may have been the one where the person died in the fire, because maybe they couldn't escape the fireball or the flames or anything by then. Some of these other cars here burnt, and you can just see just how much debris is. There's looks like part of a wing there, I'm not sure. And that's all they gave us. They always cut off short on us. Now, another cause that some people have proposed too is, what about rapid decompression of the plane as it was taking off? Can that cause it to go down? Well, there's actually precedence for this. There's this two that I can think of that come to mind. If you remember the plane crash from the famous golfer, Payne Stewart, remember him? Back in 1999, he was on a jet. He was on a flight going from Orlando here in Florida, I think, to Dallas. And all of a sudden, he didn't turn when they were supposed to. They kept going and going and going. And they sent the Army jets up to follow it. And they noticed that the windows were all fogged over and iced over. And so they knew that there was a rapid decompression had happened. But apparently, nobody got to the oxygen in time. And so they all just succumbed to it, asphyxia. And then the plane just went down and crashed on its own when it ran out of fuel. And then there was another example of that in 2023 of another plane that crashed in Virginia. The exact same thing. So the question is could that have happened here in Philly? And I say, no, that could not have happened. Why? because if you have a rapid decompression at 1,650 feet, which was their maximum altitude there, you're fine. There's no problem with the oxygen there. You can still breathe at that height. Heck, I went skiing in Breckenridge at 11,000 feet, and there's very little oxygen up there, but you can still survive and be okay and have no problem. Where it becomes a problem is when you're way up into the 20, 30,000 feet range, and then you have a decompression. Then there's no oxygen, and you'll probably lose consciousness within a few seconds. So I do not think that that would be the cause here in Philly. Another possibility could be, what if there was a medical emergency, like maybe the captain or the co-pilot or somebody had a heart attack right as they were taking off, and they go into the controls like this. And it can take a, few seconds for the other pilot to react and to move you back if you need to be moved and switch control over to their side. I don't know if that needs to be done. But, a few seconds when you're only 1,600 feet off the ground and you have essentially 10 seconds at the most, all sorts of stuff can go wrong at that point. There also could have been a disturbance on board. Maybe a fight breaks out. These are weirder things have happened. But they will have to investigate all of this when they do their human factors studies as part of this investigation. Make no mistake about it, folks. And I hate to even bring this up, but what if it was an intentional drive into the ground? They have to examine that too, because we have seen pilots do that many times. In fact, there was a flight, I think it was a year or two ago, where the co-pilot just jumped out of the plane. So people can do strange things, and all of these have to be investigated by the NTSB. They may not come out and say it, but I can guarantee you they'll be probably looking into the financial records of everybody involved. They have to be very thorough. Well, if you have any questions on this crash, or if you have any of your own ideas of what you think might have caused it, let us know down in the comments. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see all of you on the next one.